Thank you, Function 8, my fellow panelists, and thank you all of you all for attending this forum. I look forward to a lively discussion. My remarks will be similarly brief. I want to start off by saying that I listened very carefully to the commentaries and debates within Parliament and outside of Parliament and in the media. And it remains my view that Pofma will do more harm than good. I have to say that that it was all very disappointing that despite so many people, including people who attended the select committee hearings, the wider public, many commentators and international organizations, the government made absolutely no changes to the bill and passed it into law. Well, here we are. Pofma is now the law. I want to take a slightly different approach and put Pofma within the broader context, the broader political context, and many of the issues regarding Pofma can be seen within a broad theme and within the context of the politics of fear. So I would like to talk about Pofma and the politics of fear. Pofma exposes the use of the politics of fear by the PAP government. What is the politics of fear? I'm sure that you have arrived at the right place. But we in Singapore are at the wrong place, as James pointed out. And that is what I'm going to talk about. So, political leaders use fear as the driving force against the people. You know, they basically threats against the well-being of people are subtly introduced into the public mind, and this results in a powerful emotion, and this response overrides reason and even rational thinking and prevents the critical assessment of policies like Pofma and many other policies. So when I talk about the politics of fear in Pofma, I'm really talking about Singapore. Now, you may think that I'm overcritical. But let's talk about two recent surveys. One by the Reuters Institute. And the Reuters Institute did a survey and found that 63% of Singaporeans were afraid they would get into trouble for openly expressing their political views online, quote unquote. This is not me talking. This is the expression and evidence of real fear within our public. Singapore ranked the second most fearful country in this survey. This survey only confirms what we already know, of course. Clearly, Singaporeans live in considerable fear of the PAP government. Contrast this against a survey that was done by Wake Up Singapore and published, I think, today or yesterday, in which 96% of 1,800 people surveyed said that they are against Pofma, contrary to popular belief. So we are now told in the as Pofma was hotly debated and the controversy raged in the media, that well, if this law is so wrong, the PAP will pay for it at the ballot box. If they abuse their powers, they will pay for it through the vote. The fact of the matter is that there's an overwhelming impulse at the ballot box, which equally clearly would be an emotional one and not a rational one. That powerful and overwhelming emotion is fear. Fear of reprisal and fear as to one's well-being. Well, I've sketched this picture of a Singapore public that is fearful. Now, how did this happen? Why? Why are we at this point? Well, because the Singapore government has a track record of instilling fear, don't you think? From starting with, Lee Kuan Yew, he put the fear of communists and Marxists. He used the preventive detention powers under the ISA, defamation suits, the destruction of livelihoods and other punitive reprisals for years and years. I dare say that the fear that arose out of all that is deeply embedded within the Singapore psyche today. So the PAP government of today have carried out this tactics of fear, and Pofma is yet another example of their brand of the politics of fear. And I've no doubt that in time to come there will be suitable high-profile scapegoats, including maybe one or all of us under Pofma, just to instill yet even more fear. Now, everything about Pofma has to do with fear. Fear-mongering marked the law right from its conception through to its passing into law. You will remember the select committee hearings. You will remember just how intimidation was used against some who offered very critical views of Pofma. You will also remember all the debates in Parliament were about calamity. It was about terrible harm, the inevitable riots, the end of Singapore, on and on. The newspapers and television, the media, of course, amplified these fears, right? Pofma, therefore, is the product of the politics of fear. The government deliberately aroused public fear and alarm about fake news to justify the law. I could give you several examples, but for the sake of time, I can leave that to questions and answers, and I'll just conclude now. The question is, what next? So, I've sketched briefly the politics of fear and how it impacts Singapore. Fear is one of the most powerful human emotions. When in fear, rational thinking deserts us, which is precisely what the PAP government wants to engineer. Fear is a survival or defense mechanism. It is no coincidence that fear-mongering politicians are also, frankly, the ones who are the greatest purveyors of misinformation. What does this say about Singapore? That we are ruled by fear? Now, is this the Singapore we want? Is this the sort of future that we want for our children in Singapore? A Singapore that continues to fear the PAP government. So what should we do now? We should first and foremost see Pofma for the political tool that it actually is. And we should call it out. We should say that this is what it really is. We should refuse to succumb to the PAP tactics of fear. And we should respond with the force of our convictions. Now, we must be brave and forge ahead. There's a Chinese proverb, one cannot refuse to eat just because there is a chance of being choked. I wish I knew the Chinese version of that or was able to articulate it properly, but for those of you who know, what it means is that you must continue to say what we must. For the sake of the future generations of Singaporeans, we must not be afraid anymore. Science has not found, to the best of my knowledge, a cure for fear. But to my mind, the best antidote for fear is courage. And on that note, I thank you and I will be happy to take questions.